Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, should property taxes be increased so county workers get a 5.5% raise? MCPS has an interim superintendent, and is he scrambling for more state aid? Should the county council move from Rockville? And in our Hogan update, stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the president of Progressive Maryland, Elbridge James, former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, Republican activist Jerry Cave, and political consultant Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Montgomery County Executive Isaiah Leggett announced this week that he had reached an agreement with the county's employee unions, which would increase county employees' pay by as much as 5.5% for fiscal year 2016, but the deal is still waiting approval by the county council. Leggett described the new pact as a modest increase compared to the 9.75% increase negotiated in 2013. But he also acknowledged that he would need to propose a significant property tax increase to pay for the new contracts. Susan, Mr. Leggett may consider this a modest proposal, but County President George Leventhal indicated that any budget submitted by the county executive that breaks the charter cap would receive stiff opposition from the council. So why do county workers deserve such a major increase?
Well, first of all, we need to realize that it's a 2% pay increase across the board. And then there's other increases for step increases and merit increases. And it's going to be interesting to watch what comes out of this because the county council does have to vote 9-0 to get an increase in the property tax rate. But you've got to realize that in the larger context of the budget, this pay increase is small. And with our new governor proposing cuts across the board to everything, it's making it a lot more difficult. So we'll have to watch. Is the county council going to make this a priority?
But here's the problem. The citizens of Montgomery County are not rolling in dough. The economy of is still in the doldrums. Most citizens of the county have not seen major increases, and they're going to increase their property taxes once again.
No, I think that a 2% pay increase is not that astronomical at the moment.
It's a 5.5% increase in the amount of pay that is going to the employees.
No, not everyone is getting the other increase. The
Jerry,
3.5.
property tax revenue is pretty high.
My house. I'm ready. Casey, I don't need your question.
Wait a minute. And our assessments are going up now that the market is somewhat improving. So why do we have to increase the mill rate that we're all paying for property taxes?
Let me tell you the story. I got a lot more influence than any Republican in Montgomery County. I'm on the phone. My house has been for sale for 10 months. I'm talking to Ike Leggett. I said, not yet. And I got it ratified, and then I said, now you can announce the increase. Is the man living in some other state than Maryland? The Democrats just lost the governorship in the state of Maryland because Art O'Malley was raising taxes and spending too much money. But you know what? Democrats don't have to worry about that here. And nobody advocates. Nobody advocates. I am answering the question. Nobody advocates for the citizens and for the taxpayers because the county workers have unions that have power with the state officials, and the state officials get elected no matter what.
We're talking about the county official. Mark, see if you can bring some reasonableness to this argument here.
Well, I mean, I have to say I can't disagree with Jerry. The 5%, even the 2%, is above what people have been getting in the private sector in the Washington area. So, and this is, of course, as was said, on top of the 9.5% increase that was in the last contract. You have a pattern of public sector increases that are well above what private sector is getting. Now,
but was that on top of or in place of? And if I remember correctly, that's in place of the 9%. And in fact, the article was said, and what we've read, in fact, is that the 5%, which is the total aggregate, is replacing the 9%
that was
negotiated.
That was the 2013 agreement. This is a new one for 2015. So those increases have already been
But
baked
when that
in.
one took place, they had not had any pay increases in many years. Plus, there had been furloughs across the board.
And
Y'all are
and
missing the point.
freezes.
Mark's 100% right. People in the private sector are fighting tooth and nail to keep their things going.
Except
and
if you're
they're
working
not
at
getting-
Walmart.
They're
Because
not
Walmart
getting
pays
5.5% increases.
Walmart and other private sector jobs now are increasing salaries.
No,
they
but-
recognize to keep their
The people at
employees.
Walmart would love to have a government salary.
Guess what? The people, all
Eldridge,
businesses are recognizing you
The
have to start
Department
paying
of Labor
employees.
Statistics tracks this. Those are not, the private sector numbers are not going up by that amount. And actually, Washington area in the last year or so have been one of the weakest metropolitan areas in terms of increase in income and increase in growth because government spending is going down. This is simply out of line. It doesn't reflect the reality of this particular area to be constantly increasing salaries like this.
But
But there's nobody advocating for the taxpayer.
I want to hear from Susan on this.
If we go back, and I know that 9 point whatever percent seems astronomical, but at the time they had not had any increases in
Correct.
years and years. And you
But
have
neither
to,
have
During that
but-
time, people in
Let
the private
me
sector were
finish.
losing their jobs, getting paid half
neither
as
have
much
the
money.
citizens. This is the problem.
But
with
let's
public
remember,
sector
Ike
increases.
Leggett has led this county well and kept us in good shape through really, really, really hard times. And
You got to go to the rest of the country to
All right,
find hard
wait,
times.
guys, we're going to have to wrap this up. Look, I think this is a topic that we should all debate because there's a difference between the private sector and the public sector, and people in Montgomery County are going to start recognizing that there are hidden problems in the economy of Montgomery County still. We're going to do our next topic, which is interim superintendent of public schools Larry Bowers has been thrust into a difficult position while filling in for the departed Joshua Starr. Bowers has been an MCPS employee for 37 years and until being selected to be the interim chief has been the chief operating officer for the school system. But on his second day in office, Mr. Bowers was in Annapolis, pounding the halls of the General Assembly, pleading for additional state aid pleading for additional state aid. And that issue is money for school construction funding, which if not passed by the General Assembly, could result in a cut of $213 million from the capital improvement plans of Montgomery County school system. Elbridge, with the state facing a reduction in revenues and a governor unwilling to increase spending, are we likely to see an increase in construction spending?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. This is an area where all Montgomery residents and citizens want to have improvement. We're not going to talk about salaries. We're talking about the quality of education for our children in terms of the environment that they're in. And we've talked before about those temporary classrooms and how they need to be replaced. This is what we're trying to do, and unfortunately, we may be in a governmental economic environment where that won't happen in the next year or two. Stay tuned and see what happens.
But when we talk about construction funding, these are long-term dollars and long-term plans, and sometimes the wishes and grandiose plans of the educators sometimes get out of hand. I mean, we have to manage our money, don't we?
We're managing the money. In fact, that is part of, as we say, return the county budget and the state budget, where they have to come to some sort of agreement in terms of what is best for our children. And so, as you said, those are long term, but we still have to look at what is best of our children, and the environment that they're in plays a big role in the education process.
Mark, one of the things that the county educators do emphasize is that Montgomery County's AAA bond rating and the size of the school system should be given deferential treatment and be considered in the allocation of construction funding, and therefore the county deserves more money.
Well, and the county has looked at ways of being able to more effectively leverage the resources that it gets from the state and working through with a sort of shifting to allow for more capital dollars, and that's certainly something that over a period of years can be looked at. I think you put your finger on it. Yes, we have a problem right now. What we got to do is get the economy of the state growing again and have the revenues over a period of years so that we can get back to basically keeping within our means, but being able to fund these projects.
I got a question on construction. The little Catholic school I went to was built in the 50s, and it's still there, and all that has is a different coat of paint on it. The public school has been built and rebuilt, and contractors told me it's going to need to be rebuilt again in 20 years. And when they rebuilt it, they didn't build it big enough. I mean, this is just stupidity and building these places and taking care of them.
I do feel sorry for Mr. Bowers and the job he's taken over, because not only might we not get the construction fund, the geographical disparity funding is gone, according to Governor Hogan. And so all around, we talk about learning cottages or whatever you want to call them. And Casey, you've been always uptight about that isn't a good way to educate our kids. If we don't get some money for construction, it's only going to get worse and worse.
Wait a minute. I want to clear up one thing. I don't think it's the classroom or the trailer that produces well-educated kids, or keeps kids from being educated. You've got your teachers are the ones who can teach, and there's got to be an emphasis on the student population that they can learn. Jerry talks about growing up back in the idyllic 50s and 60s when there were 40 kids to a classroom, and yeah, those kids got an education because they needed to get an education, and somebody was pushing them to get an education. The same is true here. If parents want their kids to be educated, they can get them educated in the Montgomery County school system right now in a trailer.
Yes,
they don't need a brand new building.
Well, but there are schools that are bursting at the seam up county and down in lower county, and I don't know where they're going to go soon.
Susan,
I mean,
you can't blame this on Larry Hogan. He's been in office for
no,
about
but
10
he
minutes.
has cut out geographical disparity.
The elected officials out of Montgomery County to the state capital have never asked or lobbied or gotten the money for us.
Well, wait a minute.
That's not true, Jerry.
Wait a minute.
They have the largest delegation in there.
No, it's not the delegation. There's a systematic problem with their planning. They haven't planned well, and they haven't allocated well. Now, when we come back from the
I hate to agree with you, but I do.
I know.
Wow, that's a first.
Don't get a heart attack.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't get a heart attack, because we come back from this short break. Should the county council move its offices out of Rockville? And our update from Annapolis. Stay tuned. And welcome back. The county council is considering the fate of the Stella B. Warner building and whether the council should renovate the aged office building where the county is housed or build something new. Susan, the cost for renovating the Warner building is about $31 million, and the option to build a new office building to house the council on a site where the old district courthouse stands in Rockville is about $36 million. But why are these the only alternatives? There are other towns other than Rockville. Why don't we move it to Gaithersburg or Tacoma Park or Silver Spring, someplace close to a metro stop?
I don't even know where to start, Casey. First of all, the county office building is pretty darn close to a metro, like 2 blocks. Secondly,
No, it's not.
yeah, it is. The Rockville Metro.
Have you ever walked it?
Yes, I have.
It's more than 2 blocks, Susan.
Maybe 3.
Okay.
Okay, so, and the other thing is the judicial office buildings, the executive office building are in Rockville, and a lot of the departments are in Rockville. It makes no sense to move elsewhere. The building is old, it needs refurbishment. For instance, one of the things that are wrong is like the bathrooms aren't ADA accessible. So if you're in a wheelchair, you're in real trouble. So we need something new. And for those who say, well, the county council's too big, if you look at the COB building right now, the Warner building, there are multiple departments in that building, and they just need some help.
There's empty office space all over Rockville. Why don't they just rent some new office space?
Maybe in that place where the storage place was supposed to be.
Why do they need? That would be a good idea. Maybe Mayor, what's the mayor's name?
Bridget Newton.
Can lead them down, and Burl Feinberg can say, let's go down to Taft Street and build a new building down there.
It doesn't make sense to separate them from the executive. I have never heard of where the legislative and the executive department are moved so far apart. They need to stay in downtown Rockville.
Oh, we need that synergy? Is
The
that what
synergy.
We need that synergy.
To keep them enlightened, Casey.
The bureaucrats need to synergize together.
Yeah,
If you look at
exactly.
transportation,
Jerry,
you look at transportation, the almost all metro transportation and all the county ride-on situations end up in Rockville. They have planned it as a hub. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you might have been able to try to move them out of the Rockville area. But now transportation and
Why
everything
don't we,
is
why
in
don't we,
Rockville.
why don't we build a building over the metro train lines? Put a building there.
Wait a second.
Have great access for citizens coming up and down on the metro.
Well, what
I mean,
would
the
you do with?
transportation hubs?
They're talking about changing these buildings, so not getting rid of them, but just fixing them up. I mean,
Well,
For the
that-
first time in
some
a
of
long
us-
time, I agree with Susan. I don't know where to begin, and I don't think they should begin. Why did they get new offices? Weren't we just talking about money problems? This is like a couple who has money problems and they're going to renovate the kitchen. Are they idiots?
they
Just
have been
do
talking about
nothing.
this for years, and they
Well,
keep
let them talk about
postponing
it
it
for
and
more years
postponing
and live
it.
with the building
Maybe
they're
we should.
in.
Maybe we
That's
should
what
put,
everybody else
maybe
does.
we should put the county council in trailers.
Could I
maybe
just-
that's the solution.
But
to the
there are
problem.
simple things like leaking roofs and ADA accessible bathrooms. There are things that have to be
I
addressed.
got to make a humble suggestion. Whoever was in charge of the Silver Spring Transit Center should have nothing to do with this project.
Well-
Maybe the whole administration that was behind that should have nothing to do with this project.
I think-
Maybe they shouldn't do anything that has
Look,
to do with
the
construction.
Stella B. Warner building is an aged building, and it probably does need to be renovated.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, is it a better alternative to build a new building somewhere else? I don't agree with you that you have to have all the little bureaucrats in the same building in the same area.
They're not. They used to be. You know, before the executive office building was constructed, the county executive and the county council were in the same building.
And I disagree with you. The fact is, the Stella B. Warner building is not very accessible by pedestrians. It's terrible parking for people who want to come to county hearings. And I think the idea that we're just going to renovate that building, fix up the cafeteria and the bathrooms is one that needs to be really looked at and thought through for a change. All right, we're going to take a look at what's going on in Annapolis, because things are changing in Annapolis. And once again, demonstrating that elections have consequences, Republican Governor Larry Hogan is sending a message that it isn't business as usual in Annapolis. This week, at his second meeting of the Board of Public Works, Hogan refused to approve several contracts from state agencies because they weren't competitively bid or justified. In another action, Hogan proposed farm pollution rules different than the one proposed by former Governor Martin O'Malley. In addition, Hogan outlined a plan to cut taxes on small businesses and signaled his support for charter schools. Mark, what's your assessment of how the new governor is doing?
Well, I think it's positive, but I think one of the positive things in the Board of, looking at the Board of Estimates, is the working relationship that the governor has with Peter Franchot. I mean, working on a bipartisan basis to try and address these contracts. I don't know if these contracts were in the pipeline from before when O'Malley was. It takes usually a while for these to bubble up. And so I think it's appropriate to take a second look and maybe get additional bids before something goes forward.
So Elbridge, what you sit on the other side of this fence.
I don't.
How do you think the new governor's doing?
The operative word is he's trying. Now you look at that both ways. He's trying. The charter school idea I have problems with, because we're talking about minimum school funding as it is, and charter schools take money out of the public area for funding. That's a known fact. You can't even argue with that, Jerry.
Sure, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let him finish. Let
Okay.
Elbridge finish.
I'm not finished.
And then
The issue,
you can go.
especially really the issue I have was with the pollution issue with regard to the sentiments and things of that nature, and the runoffs. Okay, these are things that were in the pipeline. The information on that's been 10 or 15 years running. I mean, we were there when we talked about arson at the chicken factories and things of this nature. But it was told to the farmers and to the ag business, the fact is that these pollutants cannot continue to be used. They know they shouldn't continue to be used, and they have dire consequences to both the bay and those that are on the land. And so he by softening those issues does not do Maryland well, not at all.
Susan, what do you think about the new governor, how he's doing things?
Well, I agree with Elbridge on the chicken issue, because they had worked out a deal with business, with the environmentalists, with everybody, and the business was happy. They said they were happy to go along with it because they had had a seat at the table the whole time. I do think that Hogan does have a positive force on the Board of Public Works along with Peter Franchot because he's happy. He's very conservative economically, and I saw Peter last week and he was smiling because they're in control now. I do think, though, that Montgomery Countyans, when you looked at the list of people who were appointed to boards, committees, and commissions by the governor, there were very few Montgomery Countyans. And so we're getting paid back in our own little way. Political payback is hell, and it may keep on going.
Well, I don't know if the counties, if you can make a blanket statement.
If
saying that
I
Montgomery
could,
County's
the governor's been in for a month. That was roughly 250 that came in the green bag.
Over 300.
But there are over 800. I mean, I talked with there's additional appointments that will be coming in down the road. But you're right, it'll reflect the cross-section of the state.
Yeah, and I do think, when Governor Hogan came to committee for Montgomery, he said, you didn't expect me here. You were one of them that didn't vote for me. And so I think it is going to be a slightly different tune.
I think I'm now going to answer one of your questions, Casey. You're asking what the assessment of Governor Hogan is, and it's brilliant. The guy is quietly going through. He ran a great campaign. He's doing a great job. He's staying away from the wrong issues, and he's so competent it's almost hard to think he's a Republican. He is doing a great job.
Whatever
Very
that
quietly.
means, Jerry.
And he's not being a fire breather, which is the only thing I don't like.
All right, well.
Casey is speechless.
I mean, I'm speechless. that almost everyone is in agreement that Hogan's doing a good job.
I didn't say good job. I just said it'll be interesting.
Susan, yeah, I know. She meant to say great job.
Did you? Well, I think one of the interesting factors is how well Hogan has done handling the General Assembly. But there are going to be major issues, and that's why it's so fascinating. Take a snapshot each week to see whether or not those political tensions have risen to the forefront and are going to be debated.
One thing I can say is that his wife is doing an amazing job. Yumi is a real asset, and it's going to be a joy to watch her in the coming years.
We missed the big story. Here's a guy who got elected and is actually doing what he said he was going to do.
Well, that's pretty fascinating. Well, we're going to take another break. Stay tuned for parting shots. More time to talk when we come back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Well, in keeping of the spirit of kumbaya that we had in the last segment about things in Annapolis, I'd like to say something positive about the Senate Majority President, or Majority Leader and Senate President Mike Miller, who, with the majority of the state senators, introduced legislation this week that would change or actually phase out the rain tax. It's not precisely what the governor wanted, which would have eliminated it. It moves it to the counties. But it is a very positive reflection of things moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Mark. Elbridge James, your parting shot.
Parting shot has to do with the school board and departed Senator Superintendent Starr. I'm glad they didn't drag it out any longer than they had to, and decided that it's best that everyone agree that we will part ways and find someone that will really work well with our residents and our students to provide quality education in Montgomery County.
Thank you, Elbridge. Susan Heltemes, your parting shot.
I want to commend Delegate Corey McCrae, a Democrat from from Baltimore City, who introduced legislation that will allow felons to vote as soon as they get out of prison. It's that way in many, many states in this nation. The thing is, if you pay the time, you have the right to vote. Everyone deserves the right to vote. And Republicans, before you freak out, historically they don't vote in high numbers. But it is fair. You are out of prison, you are paying taxes, you are going forward. They deserve to be like the rest of us. Congratulations. I hope it passes.
Thank you, Susan. Jerry Cave, your parting shot.
Liberalism is an incompetent philosophy wielded by competent practitioners. Conservatism is a competent philosophy wielded by incompetent practitioners. And never has that been more clear than downtown in Washington, D.C., where Harry Reid and Obama, whose party has been devastated in the last 2 elections, are outmaneuvering Boehner and McConnell. It is frightening to watch this happen over and over again.
Thank you, Jerry. That's a very interesting comment coming from you. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in this week. I want to thank the panel for being here. We had a kind of subdued exchange this week, but you can tune in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. And remember, you can like us on Facebook and you can follow us on Twitter or whatever else you do. So for 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.